Hello, glad to see you on my channel. I really value it. And today I want to share with you a wonderful story. It's a dramatic story that will come as a total shock to everybody. It is a really amazing story. So enjoy watching it. Barbara was the kind of girl you'd say, Komsomol, student, athlete, and just beautiful. But since Barbara was born in 1992, the Komsomol was out of the question. Everything else was pure truth. The girl studied at the psychological faculty of the university, respected sports, and not just respected, and in her free time went to the gym and conquered guys with her gorgeous figure and exquisite beauty. Her green, slightly slanted eyes brought associations with witches, mermaids, and undines, and long, up to the waist, golden brown hair completed the impression. There was no shortage of admirers, but the heart of the young beauty was taken in the first year of university. Its happy owner was Alex, a law student. The guy was a year older. "Excuse me, can you tell me where the third block is?" He once heard the melodious voice of a beautiful freshman and realized that he was lost. "Come on, I'll show you," Alex offered with a smile, and the girl nodded gratefully. On the way to the block, young people got acquainted, and the same day they realized that they were made for each other. After receiving his diploma, Alex got a job in the tax inspection. The salary was impressive, and the young specialist thought about making Barbara an offer. And why not? After all, in a year Alex was already standing on his feet and therefore could provide for his family. "I'll propose when Barbara gets her diploma." He shared his plans with his parents, and they quite approved of their son's decision. They were very fond of Barbara. "This is not a bride, but a real miracle," said Anna, Alex's mother. "And smart and beautiful and economic. Don't you dare miss her." "I'm not going to," replied the son with a smile. "It's done." Barbara received her diploma, and Alex made the girl an offer, which she gladly accepted. A young employee of the tax service decided not to save money on the wedding. The celebration was cheerful, crowded, and very beautiful. It seemed that there would be a lot of happiness ahead, but life often presents surprises, which, unfortunately, are not always pleasant. How many spouses did not try to conceive a child? They did not succeed. A child. They did not succeed. Alex and Barbara bypassed a lot of doctors, but all to no avail. The young woman became depressed. "Don't worry, kitten," Alex said. "I love you, and that's the most important thing. The rest will come." And then many women get pregnant when they've given up all hope. So as long as we're alive, all is not lost. "Yeah," Debbie smiled weakly. "You're probably right." She tried not to despair, but apparently she wasn't trying hard enough. Once, after another failed attempt to get pregnant, she'd snapped at Alex for the first time, though she couldn't blame him. That night, for the first time, her husband didn't come home for the night, and then it just kept escalating. 3 months later, Barbara came home and found a pretty blonde girl in her bed. A girl, because the pretty girl was hardly of legal age. Too young. Barbara had once sincerely thought that such situations were possible only in bad jokes, but not in life. Turns out she was wrong. No, she didn't make a jealous scene. What for? Humiliation? Well, no. That's not Debbie's thing. She just turned around and went back to her parents' place. A week later, Alex stood on the doorstep of her parents' apartment. "I'm sorry," he said, handing Barbara a bouquet of tulips. "I don't know if I can," she replied, looking thoughtfully at her husband. "You try," Alex said faintly. God knows she tried to appear calm, but she couldn't hold back her tears. Her husband held Barbara close to him and stroked her hair. "Shoo, shush, it's okay." The same day, Barbara returned to Alex. The family idyll lasted exactly 1 month. That is, until Barbara, returning from work, accidentally saw her husband with a good acquaintance. Alex and Leslie were sitting in a cafe holding hands. Barbara was tempted to run into the cafe and pull Leslie's hair, and Alex would have had a good time too. But after a minute, Barbara thought, no, we'll go the other way. That evening, when they were both home, She said she'd seen the whole thing. In her subconscious, Barbara hoped that Alex would say that it had been a chance encounter and purely friendly, but nothing of the sort had happened. "Yes," the husband replied with a sigh. "I should have told you this earlier. Leslie and I love each other." "How long have you had this?" the young woman asked in a shaky voice. "No," Alex shrugged his shoulders. "What difference does it make?" "Really, it doesn't," Barbara sobbed and ran out into the street. And then there was a divorce, with all the consequences in the form of apartment division of property, and the news about Leslie's pregnancy. That was a low blow. "But calm down. Everything will get better," tried to reason Barbara friend Kathy. "With such beauty, you won't be alone for long." But Debbie just shook her head. She didn't trust anyone anymore. In the back of her mind, somewhere in the very bottom of it, there was a glimmer of hope that Alex would come back, but he'd forgotten all about Barbara. Her classmate, Selena, who wasn't particularly tactful, told her that Alex and Leslie were happy, walking through the park, holding hands. "And your ex is like a devoted dog," Selena gushed, ignoring the look on Barbara's face. Holding hands, she thought, just like that time in the cafe. And out loud she said, "Selena, I'm sorry, but I'm not interested." Debbie worked as a school psychologist, but now she felt like a cobbler without boots. She herself needed help from a specialist, so the principal suggested that Barbara take a week off. The young woman gladly accepted the offer. She went to the campground, where she walked a lot and read books. Of course, men tried to court her, but Barbara only joked that she was waiting for a prince. A week flew by like one day. On the way to the city, Barbara feared that she would be depressed again, but it didn't. She went back to work. Life went on as usual, and it seemed that the wound was beginning to heal. But one day, Debbie was walking down the street and saw Leslie with an Eric scan. The young woman became hysterical. She sat down on a bench and started screaming. "Are you feeling ill?" Some man about 25 asked sympathetically. "I guess so," Barbara nodded. "But you mustn't worry about that." "Well, why not?" disagreed the young man, handing her a small bottle of mineral water. "We're all human beings. Sometimes it's good to talk it out. And a stranger is a much better choice than a best friend." Debbie remembered how Selena had put salt on her wound. It was then that she decided that the young man's words had merit. Barbara also realized that she really needed to talk. Her friends didn't really care about her problems, but then why should a strange man care about them? He offered himself as a shoulder to cry on. "My name is Cody, by the way." The man introduced himself with a smile. "Barbara," she smiled trustingly back. "So what's your problem, Barbara?" Cody asked softly. It's just hard to imagine that such a beautiful girl could have serious problems. She sighed and told her sad story. "What can I say?" the young man said. "We all walk under God, and no one knows what will happen tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, in a week. There is no need to despair. And your husband? Well, then he wasn't the man for you." "Maybe," Barbara nodded. "But to be honest, it doesn't make me feel any better." "You know what you need right now is time," Cody shrugged and winked. "You know what you need?" "What's that?" "A drink." "I'm sorry, what?" "Get drunk," repeated the new acquaintance. "I don't really drink." "Neither do I," he laughed. "But there's a first time for everything, isn't there? So shall we go to the bar?" "Let's drink to getting to know each other." "Let's go," she decided. That day, Barbara drank herself into oblivion for the first time. The next morning, she woke up in her own apartment, realizing that there was someone lying next to her. The young woman cried out. It was Cody. "What are we doing up?" he asked cheerfully, opening his eyes. "And you and I are what?" Cody grunted amusedly, and a second later he laughed infectiously. "Barbara, well, actually, we switched to you last night at the bar. Do you mind?" "No, not really," she mumbled embarrassedly. "But The young woman stopped talking and Cody said seriously, "Barbara, we're adults. What happened is what happened. Well, if you're so uncomfortable, I can leave and you'll never see me again." Debbie was silent. She suddenly realized she didn't want to. Admittedly, Cody was an attentive and interesting conversationalist. More importantly, he was much easier to be around. According to Cody, he was a freelancer. However, when asked what he does, Cody answered, "A little bit of everything. Sometimes I work with advertising agencies, repair cars, phones, that sort of thing." "I see," Barbara nodded. A few months later, Cody proposed to Barbara. They signed without witnesses and other wedding trimmings and started a family life. This time, the lack of children didn't bother Debbie too much. Sometimes Barbara wondered how long would Cody last. She waited for Cody to have enough soup. She waited for her spouse to talk about children. But it never happened. What did happen was much worse. Debbie came home from work one day and found a young woman tending to her kitchen. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" Barbara was taken aback. "And I'm Allah," smiled the stranger. "Allah? It's a pleasure. My name is Debbie. You must be a relative of Cody's." "Yeah, something like that," Allah nodded. "I didn't see you at the wedding," Bar said. "I wasn't there. But I'm going to live here now." "Didn't Cody say he was planning to file for divorce?" "Are you kidding?" Debbie exclaimed. "Not at all," Allah shrugged. "You'll get a divorce and I'll live here. With Cody. What do you mean here? This is my apartment." "Well, my dear, it was yours. Now it's ours," grinned the uninvited guest. "Do you want to see some ID?" Barbara already sensed something wrong, but she said, "If you'd be so kind." And when Debbie saw the document that said the apartment now belonged to Cody, her eyes darkened. It was nothing more than a deed of gift. According to its contents, Barbara had given Cody her apartment. "You see," Allah declared triumphantly, "Cody's apartment, and you have almost no rights to it. I say almost because it's a matter of time." "You're all lying," Barbara shouted. "That document is a fake. I'm going to call Cody right now." "Please do," her rival snorted. And when she heard the key rattle in the keyhole, she added, "And there he is, by the way. So no need to call anyone." "Well, I see you've already met him," Cody said with a wicked smile, and Barbara realized with horror that everything Allah had said was true. "Cody, what does that mean?" She demanded an explanation. "What it means, my dear, is that you are nobody in this apartment and your name is Nick. I'm filing for divorce, and Allah will be living here now. However, I think she's already enlightened you on that point." "But why?" Barbara whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "No reason," Cody shrugged. "If you want to live, you've got to get around. And if you don't want to be evicted from here with the police, you better pack up your stuff and vacate the premises." I'm still your wife," she squeezed out. "That's true," nodded her husband. "But it's a matter of 1 month. Will it make a difference?" "I think not. This is my woman, and you're not here." And, smirking, he added, "Or do you want to be the third? I didn't know you were such a fancy girl." "You're such a bastard," Barbara shook her head. "Well, that's just the way it is." The young woman realized that she had nothing more to do here and went to pack her things. "There you go," Cody said approvingly. "I always knew you were a smart girl." Barbara packed her suitcase and left the apartment. But where to go? Her parents were so happy that after the divorce, which had not been easy for their daughter, she had managed to organize her personal life and eventually fall victim to a con man. And where to go? Barbara thought frantically. The young woman sat on a bench and caught the pitying glances of people passing by. She looked very unhappy indeed. Barbara went to Kathy, who lived nearby. "Did you go to the police?" she asked her friend. "No," she shook her head. "I hadn't thought about it." "You should have." "So the document seems to be authentic," Debbie said in despair. That's not a sure thing. Anyway, it should be checked. I'll tell you what, you're welcome to stay. But go to the police first thing tomorrow morning. I will. A visit to the police turned up nothing. What can I say? The officer, whose name was John. You've just been conned out of your apartment. I understood that without you, Barbara said dejectedly. But what can I do? Can the document be checked for authenticity? Of course, said the policeman. But for that we need a warrant. What's the problem? The young woman started to get agitated. And you don't yell at me. You get involved with the wrong people. And then you teach us how to work. I'm sorry. Barbara decided it was better not to make the policeman angry. God forbid he'd refuse to take the case. Oh, come on. He waved his hand. All right then. Now I'll give you a few pictures of marriage and apartment swindlers. Maybe among them will be your spouse. The policeman laid out in front of the young woman a few pictures, and that's him, Debbie exclaimed. That's Cody. Are you sure? Well, you know, I lived with this man for a year. The thing is, this man is known to us as Mike, the policeman said. You're not the first person he's dumped on an apartment. So, Barbara asked in a low voice, what are my chances of getting my apartment back? We'll do our best, John replied evasively. She only sighed. It didn't sound very encouraging, to put it bluntly. But there was nothing to be done. Come over tomorrow at 10:00 and we'll visit the apartment, John added. Okay, Barbara nodded and left the office. She was terrified to even think that she might be left on the street. Barbara's parents lived in a one-bedroom apartment, and she didn't want to embarrass them or upset them. So, what did the police tell you? Katie asked when Barbara returned. Nothing concrete yet, she sighed and told them about the visit to the police. I don't envy you, friend, Kathy said sympathetically. Well, let's hope for the best. Let's hope for the best. But hopes for the future did not materialize. The document turned out to be genuine, and the policemen had no choice but to wave their hands in the air. But is there nothing that can be done? Debbie asked. Is there no way to prove that I lived here? After all, I got this apartment as a result of the exchange after the divorce. Divorce, John grinned. You're having a good time, citizen. And for the future, I recommend to be more careful in choosing a life partner. Don't get involved with just anyone, and everything will be like people. Barbara realized that the police just didn't want to spoil statistics with another case. But maybe there were other ways to get the apartment back, Katie thought. There must be evidence that you and your ex-husband had traded apartments. Are you just going to give up? Who told you that? But it wasn't that simple. Apparently, Cody, Mike, was a master con artist. There was no record of the apartment exchange, and the deed of gift in Cody's name was genuine. What was there to do? Just go to her parents and tell them everything. After all, Katie had a boyfriend, Liam, who was looking at the young and beautiful lodger with marked interest. Barbara, I understand and sympathize with you, but I need you to understand, Kathy said. Yes, I understand, Barbara replied and went to pack her things. But trouble doesn't come alone. A few days after the young woman moved in with her parents, Robert, her father, began to have severe heart pains. A massive heart attack, doctor said. He could not be saved. And after Robert quietly in her sleep, her mother, Maria, passed away. It's my fault, Debbie mused. It's because of my problems that Daddy and Mommy are gone. And then there was the apartment issue again. The one bedroom in which Debbie's parents lived turned out to be disputed, and she was asked to leave it. But how can this be, she asked, a city official, confused. You see, I just don't have anywhere else to go. And you think that's my problem? The burly middle-aged woman said arrogantly. That's when Barbara realized that it was a dead end. It couldn't get any worse. The young woman left the apartment and went wherever the eyes were looking. Barbara had some money left, enough to rent a small house in the private sector, but she decided not to spend it. So the young woman moved into a social hotel for people in difficult life situations. But no matter how you look at it, she became the most natural homeless person. no registration, no place of her own. On top of that, Barbara was fired from school. It's nothing personal, the principal said. But I don't need problem employees. A psychologist living in a social hotel. Christopher, I need something to live on, Barbara said in despair. I'm sure I'll think of something good. He nodded. When you do, you can come back. I'm sure you won't have any trouble getting a job. Debbie, I'm going to be very frank. Personally, I like you a lot. But there's such a thing as institutional image. It's gotten to the point where students are whispering about you. So, I'm sure the hotel will take good care of you. You won't starve to death. I heard you, Barbara replied. I won't spoil the image of the school. Good day to you. With that, the young woman left. And when she left the principal's office, she really felt the mocking glances of her colleagues and students. God, until when fate will test me for strength, thought Debbie sadly. She went back to the hotel and sat down on a flimsy sofa, covering her face with her hands. Barbara thought back to her ex-husband, the con man Cody, Mike, the social hotel, and finally her dismissal. Did something happen to you? Diana, a friend in distress, inquired. Diane had been victimized by black realtors. Just like Barbara, she had trusted a charming man, and he had drugged her and thrown her outside in the winter cold. And if it hadn't been for the hotel staff passing by on a raid, Diana wouldn't be alive. What happened? Barbara asked apathetically. Nothing except that I have nowhere to live. And now I've lost my job. What's work got to do with it? Because I'm ruining the image of the school with my unenviable status. Debbie grinned wryly and told Diana about the conversation with the headmaster. Bastards, she exclaimed. No, Barbara sighed. It's much simpler than that. It's every man for himself, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's right, Diana nodded, and noticing a strand of hair on Barbara's shoulder, she said, Your hair is coming out. It must be nervous. In the morning, they awoke to screams. Fire! Fire! Just what they needed. The smell of burning could be smelled more and more clearly, and people were running for the exit. Don't panic, don't panic. The hotel director exhorted the guests. The inn had burned to the ground. Now Barbara and the others had only one way out. As long as Barbara had money, she lived in a hostel. But that ran out, and the young woman was forced onto the streets. No money, no place to live, the receptionist said. But maybe I can do some work. Around the corner. I'm not afraid of any work. We do not practice this, replied the employee, and defiantly began to write something in a notebook, occasionally looking at the screen of the laptop in front of her. Well, thank you for that, Barbara replied with a sigh and headed for the exit. Wait! The receptionist called out to her. You say you're not afraid of any work. There's a hospice a block away. Maybe they'll hire you to take care of the sick for room and board. See if you can apply there. Thank you. The young one nodded and left the hostel. I understand and sympathize with you, but the staff is full, said the head of the hospice. But you also understand us. A psychology degree is good, of course, but we already have a psychologist. We can't help everyone who needs help. After all, this isn't a labor exchange. But maybe I'll be a backup, Barbara insisted. There was no choice. I wouldn't take up much space. I wouldn't embarrass anyone. There was a knock on the door, and the superintendent said, I'm sorry, but I have to work. Come in. A young, elegantly dressed man entered the office. Hello, Oliver. The superintendent smiled cordially. What are you doing here? Hello, Liam, replied the visitor with dignity. I need to talk to you. Are you still here? The superintendent frowned, looking at Barbara. I'm sorry, the young woman said quietly and left the office. Barbara walked down the corridor, wondering if there was another social hotel in town. There was no money on her cell phone, so she couldn't scour the city for one. Debbie was already approaching the exit when suddenly she was called out. Wait. The young woman turned around and saw the same young man she had met in the hospice manager's office. Are you for me? She asked. Yes, you are. The stranger nodded with a smile. Liam said you were in trouble. Who doesn't? Barbara grinned bitterly. I think I can help you, the man said. My name's Oliver, though you've heard. Well, I'd like to offer you a live-in job. You want to offer me a job? The young woman asked in disbelief. Well, yes. True, I can't pay much because of business problems, but I guarantee food and a roof over my head. Frankly, it was all too good to be true. And to tell you, getting burned twice is no joke. What if it's the kind of thing they say God loves a three-way street? But on the other hand, there were no other options, unless it was to the street where she was now. What's your name? Oliver asked. My name is Debbie, the young woman replied. Debbie, he smiled, like the singer. Well, you could say that. Barbara smiled shyly. You know what, Debbie? Oliver winked. You're much prettier. Seriously, the young woman was embarrassed. She'd forgotten that men complimented women. It was somewhere else in her life. So what about my proposal? Oliver asked. But you didn't tell me what I should do, Barbara pointed out reasonably. Oh yes, I'm sorry. And what you'd have to do is what you tried to do at the hospice. My mother needs a nurse. But first I'd like you to tell me what happened to you. The young woman was uncomfortable telling the story of being the victim of a con artist. So Barbara confined herself to the story of her divorce, the loss of her parents and the declaration of their home as disputed. Well, I think I can help you, he said, after listening to her story. Unlike most divorced women of Soviet times, Anna was not the least bit self-conscious about it. She would never live with a man on the principle. Even bad, but mine. She was closer to the principle. It is better to starve than to eat anything. After suffering a year and a half with an alcoholic with criminal tendencies, Anna showed him the door, and then, without hesitation, filed for divorce. Later she learned that her former husband went to prison for burglary and only shrugged her shoulders. Anna had to raise her son, and everything else is such nonsense. Anna worked as a dispatcher in the trolleybus park. The pay was not bad, but you could never have too much money, especially if you were a divorced woman with a child. So the young woman took a second job as a hospital nurse. The young mother was exhausted, but she knew that little Oliver would not need anything. Anna cared not that the child was fed, dressed and clothed, but also about his leisure time. Since the first grade, Oliver went to 2 sports sections on swimming and basketball. Later, the boy became interested in chess. Well, and of course, his mother did not neglect his computer literacy. The boy grew up erudite and well-rounded, and Anna was happy about it. Besides, she was proud of the fact that Oliver was a handsome guy and enjoyed success among girls. Anna was not stingy with her son's entertainment. Mom, but this is the most expensive nightclub. He shook his head when Anna gave him a flyer for a concert of a popular band on his 16th birthday. So what? His mother asked cheerfully. We live once, and you have fun. Somewhat shamefully, the boy replied. You work, tear the veins, and I have fun. Well, and when to do it if not in youth, objected Anna. Some of the relatives and friends of the family said, You spoil him, Anna. Look how it would not come to you. However, nothing of the sort happened. When it came time to think about education, Oliver said that he decided to enter the Faculty of Economics. In the future, I want to devote my life to business, he explained his choice. But the competition there is crazy, Anna said. Mommy, do you really doubt me? No, the woman shrugged her shoulders. But as far as I know, in order to enter the Faculty of Economics, you need goodwill and a lot of money. Mom, I've already thought about it, Oliver said. I'll work part-time. And where are you going to work part-time? Anna snorted. Where will they take you? I've already been hired, he smiled, at a restaurant as a waiter. That's right. Really? That's the truth. And if I have time, I'll work as a promoter or a courier. I could use a part-time job right now. Well, do it. Just don't overwork yourself too much, said my mother with a sigh, taking hold of her heart. Mom? Oliver asked fearfully. Are you feeling okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Are you sure? I'm sure. Oliver got a job as a waiter. It paid well, plus tips. The day ended when the last customer left, and that sometimes went past midnight. After those shifts, it took Oliver a Herculean effort to stay awake for class. On Saturdays and Sundays, he worked part-time as a promoter or handed out publications of an advertising nature. It was hard as hell, but the thought of studying at the Faculty of Economics and a subsequent career as a businessman warmed his soul. Some people said that for business you don't have to study for 5 years. Just take a course in the basics of entrepreneurship, said Austin, a friend of Oliver's from high school. No, I want to learn the basics. Not basics, he shook his head. I have big plans, Austin. The 5 years of his student life passed much more quickly than it had seemed to Oliver at first. He attended all the lectures faithfully, took an active part in the seminars and colloquia, but he couldn't wait to get his diploma and take his first steps in business. Sometimes Oliver thought that Austin was probably right, and there was really no need for such difficulties. He knew a lot of double majors who began to earn good money almost after school. However, being a perfectionist, the guy wanted everything to be, as he put it, by the book. And here he is, a young economist, full of the most daring plans, proudly shows his mother a red diploma. What can I say? Smiled Anna. Well done. Mom, I want only one thing, to get rich and take you to a fancy restaurant. Nothing more, nothing less. Humorist, laughed the parent. I'm more serious than ever. This will be the best encouragement. There was no money to start his own business, so the first pressing issue was employment. For a whole month, Oliver went to organizations, but in vain. We need a candidate with experience in this area, answered him in 7 companies out of 10. The remaining 2 promised to call him. Eventually, Oliver managed to get a job at a young grocery company, and his business took off. As soon as management had the opportunity to pay employees more, they did not fail to do so. After a year, Oliver decided to go freelance. I'm sorry to part with you, Eric said, as he signed the application. It was a pleasure working with you too, Oliver replied sincerely. But I've dreamed of my own business since high school. Well, let it work out, the now ex-boss nodded. What are you going to do? Unless, of course, it's no secret. No, it's no secret. I'm going to open a real estate agency. Oh, seriously, Eric said respectfully. I think so too, smiled Oliver. And you need to buy, sell, or exchange real estate? I'll be glad to help you. You bet, laughed the manager. And good luck. Thank you. And you too, Oliver replied, after which the men exchanged a firm handshake. The Romcar real estate agency began to make a profit after a couple of months. Of course, it was a long way from fabulous wealth, but Oliver had every reason to be proud of himself. On the day of his mother's 45th birthday, Oliver handed her a luxurious bouquet of dark pink roses and said, Mom, now we'll buy you the most gorgeous evening dress we can find, and tonight we'll go to a nice restaurant. How about that? Oh, but it must be expensive, Anna replied. Why don't we cook something at home? We'll invite guests, and remember what you once said to me in response to a similar phrase, he asked with a laugh, that we only live once, so we're going to the restaurant and don't argue with me. Thank goodness I can afford it now. They went to an expensive boutique and bought for Anna a stunning dress, sparkling with sequins of cobalt blue color and beautifully encircling her slender figure. And in the evening, mother and son went to a cozy country restaurant and had a nice dinner. I promised to take you out to the restaurant at least twice a year on your birthday and on March 8th. The son said solemnly. Do you want to spoil me? Anna asked with a laugh, touched by his words. That's right, Oliver confirmed. You spoiled me before, now it's my turn. The agency still fed Oliver and his subordinates well, but it was not enough for him. So Oliver started thinking about opening a new branch. And he succeeded. Oliver, Anna said at dinner one night, I was talking to my aunt today, and she asked if you could find some work for her Archie. At the mention of his cousin, Oliver snorted incredulously. For as long as he could remember, Archie had always wanted easy money. After high school, The cousin had gone to a technical school for software engineering. Archie reasoned that programmers made good money. Well, he was right. But Archie forgot about one thing. In order to earn this good money, you must first study and start working. As a result, Archie was expelled after the first session, and then the failed programmer tried to earn money. However, the ways of earning money did not inspire confidence and looked more like fraud. "Why are you fooling around?" Oliver once said. "Try to recover in tech school. Well, or go somewhere else. There's no such thing as easy money." But Archie wasn't interested in any reasonable arguments. He wanted it all. "Fortune is fickle," shrugged his cousin. "One day it's gone, the next day it's gone." "Why don't they?" Oliver asked reasonably. "You have to wait," Archie said admonishingly. Then word got out that he'd started gambling. The boy had money, and Archie said to Oliver, "Well, I told you so." Archie, even an amateur like me, knows that you get a newcomer hooked on winning first, and as soon as they get the hang of it, they start losing. Oliver grinned wryly. "Why not?" Archie objected. "If you think with your head, everything will be fine." And soon Oliver's prediction came true. Archie owed a large sum of money to some criminal mastermind, and the boy was in serious trouble. Aunt Betty, Anna's sister, came to her nephew and fell at his feet. "Oliver, I beg you, help my brother. I wouldn't survive if anything happened to him." Oliver did. "What can I do? He's a brother, after all." He generously lent the money, noting that it was time to start earning his own money. And now, a year after the story, Archie seems to have matured, or desperate to find a magical way to make some serious money. "Can you think of anything?" Anna asked. "Probably," Oliver answered after a little thought. "But I can't guarantee fabulous money. He has no education, no skills. Tell him to come tomorrow morning." To be honest, he didn't really believe Archie would come, but he did. Oliver had no idea what it would cost him to help him get his cousin a job. To Oliver's surprise, Archie was faithfully performing the duties of office manager. Grown up, Oliver noted. A few months later, Oliver logged onto his personal account to pay his tax bill and whistled. More than half the amount had left the company's accounts. It was enough to pay the tax, of course. But what to do next? All the available assets were supposed to be used for the development of the branch and some of the needs of the head office. But there was simply no money. Oliver refused to believe it, but the truth was obvious. The missing money was clearly Archie's doing. Has he started gambling again? Oliver thought dejectedly and dialed the reception desk. "Katia, would you get Archie for me, please?" "Okay, Oliver," the receptionist chirped. Archie came in about 10 minutes later. "What's the matter?" he asked. "Archie, is there anything you want to tell me?" I could tell by the look on his cousin's face that he wanted to lie, that he didn't understand. Oliver decided to take the bull by the horns. Don't let him think that being related gives Archie the right to do whatever he wants to do. He wants to work. That's fine, no. "Well then, Oliver, he's not holding anyone back. Archie, are you playing again?" he asked with metal in his voice. No. "But were you the one who took most of the money out of the accounts?" Oliver interrupted. "Did you owe someone again?" Archie was silent, frowning. "So that's why you needed this job," Oliver said. "You know, I can forgive anything but stealing from my own people. That's called ratting. After all, if you had a problem, you could have told me about it instead of hacking into the computer to steal the company's money. So what now? You're going to fire me?" Oliver nodded. "Sorry, brother, but I can't trust you." A few days later, a police officer visited the office. "Oliver?" asked the officer as he entered his office. "Yes, that's me," replied the office owner politely. "What can I do for you?" "We've received a report that Romcar is involved in apartment scams," the policeman said. "What nonsense!" Oliver exclaimed. "My company has an impeccable reputation. We've done a lot of deals through us. You should read the reviews about our firm on the internet. There have been no scams whatsoever." "We'll figure it out," said the law enforcement officer. "You'll have to come with us." "But I can't," Oliver said in desperation. "I have a meeting with a client in 20 minutes. "I don't think so." The policeman grinned. "The company's office will be sealed until the circumstances are clarified." The next 2 weeks were a living hell. Oliver was shown several documents according to which people had put their homes at the disposal of other people. The papers were genuine and drawn up in the office of the Ramkar real estate agency. Oliver could not help but realize that the apartment scams, like theft, were the work of his cousin. "I should have known what he needed the job for," he berated himself. But what's the use? The main thing now was not to go to jail. Anna's health left much to be desired, and who but Oliver would take care of her? Oliver's lawyer had done a great job. He managed to get a graphological examination, and Oliver's signature was recognized as fake. He was eventually released on his own recognizance. As for Archie, he'd gone underground so he couldn't be brought in. And where's the obvious evidence of his guilt? Anyway, Ramkar lost its sterling reputation. Clients became noticeably less, and one day Oliver was forced to declare bankruptcy. But it could have been worse. Mr. Oliver is alive and well and free. The rest will come. But his mother, no matter how Oliver tried to hide his problems from Anna, she found out about everything. All things secret, as you know, come to light, and the earth is full of rumors. "But how could it be?" her mother said in a deadened voice. "He's your brother." "Unfortunately, Mother," Oliver said with a bitter smile, "some people have nothing sacred in their hearts." "I can't get my head around it," the poor woman moaned. Anna took what had happened to her son too personally and became ill. She had difficulty walking, talking, and looking after herself. So Anna needed a caregiver. Oliver still had some money to spare, so he hired a caregiver from an agency. 3 months, he figured. And then, God willing, I'll get a proper job. Oliver, as once, in his youth, moonlighted as a courier promoter, did not disdain unloading rail cars, offered to stores as a loader. As for more monetary and stable work, its search did not yield any result. The story about the scandalized real estate office flew all over the city, and no one wanted to deal with Oliver. The young but promising businessman was too much for many people to handle. Perhaps some of his old acquaintances knew that Oliver was innocent. But such acquaintances either did not want to compromise themselves in the eyes of other representatives of the business community, or did not want Oliver, once a strong competitor, rose from his knees. Victoria, with whom Oliver met at that time, stopped answering his calls. She said she loved him. "She loves money," said Anna, who had always disliked Victoria. Money was running out, and the bankrupt rich man realized that next month he wouldn't be able to pay his nurse. Anna, meanwhile, was fading away quietly, and the doctors were just throwing up their hands. The result of severe stress, they said with one voice, plus a not very healthy heart. The main thing is to take regularly prescribed medications, calmness, and observe bed rest. Well, and appropriate care. The appropriate care came into question. After all, it required an investment, and they needed something to eat. Oliver feverishly considered his options and finally came up with an idea. He decided to contact the hospice he supervised. Maybe Liam could match him with a specialist who would agree to work for a reasonable fee, food, and a roof over his head. He was helping them, wasn't he? But Liam seemed to think otherwise. "Oh, really?" the hospice manager exclaimed. "I hire highly qualified people. My staff won't work for less than—" Liam tore off a sticker and wrote the amount he said his employees were willing to work for. Oliver couldn't afford it, but he couldn't say his trip to the hospice had been in vain. "You know what?" exclaimed the owner of the office. "Did you see that lady coming out of my office just now?" Oliver remembered the young woman Liam had apparently turned away, and he nodded. "She was offering her services for food in a corner," the manager said, "and I don't have any openings. The woman is in a difficult life situation, and anyway, if you are interested, you can catch up with her and offer her a job." "Thank you," Oliver replied, and walked quickly out of the office, thinking that the employees of hospices and other similar places were not very charitable. On second thought, however, they could hardly be blamed for that. Police officers, ritual services, surgeons, and many others touch human grief almost every day. It's their job, and if everyone sympathizes, then no one will last long. Except that Oliver had helped the hospice so much that the superintendent could come up with some kind of option for him. In fact, he did, as long as it was worthwhile. Oliver was lucky. The young woman Liam was talking about hadn't left yet. And when Oliver called out to her and the stranger turned around, he realized that this girl needed help. Her eyes were so beautiful but so sad that the former realtor owner's heart snapped. But first, the business part of the conversation. The negotiations had taken place. Oliver and his mother lived in a small but very nice cottage. Barbara entered the house and immediately felt like pinching herself. "Am I really going to live in this house?" thought the young woman, unable to believe her happiness. "Come on, I'll show you your room first," Oliver suggested, "and then I'll introduce you to your mother." "Okay, Oliver," Barbara nodded. "You can just call me Oliver," he smiled. "I'm not that old yet." Debbie only shrugged. The room she was to live in faced the sunny side and was bright, cozy, spacious. Especially after the social hotel and hostel. Barbara thought with a sigh. Just what's going to happen next? Just what's going to happen next? Is it my destiny to wander around in other people's houses from now on? "Do you like it?" asked the owner of the cottage. "Yes," Barbara nodded, wondering if he was joking. It was clear that a man who had asked for hospice care could do with any kind of accommodation. A room on the second floor of the cottage was something she couldn't even dream of. "Well, that's fine," Oliver smiled. "Would you like a bath?" "I wouldn't mind," the young woman said embarrassedly. "The bathroom is at the end of the corridor," said the unexpected employer, and added in an apologetic tone, "After washing, I can offer only a man's robe." "Thank you," nodded Barbara with a shy smile. "When was the last time I had such a luxurious bath?" thought the young woman, inhaling the aroma of strawberries with pleasure. "A long time ago, in another life." "That's right, another life. And what would that life be like?" "Let's hope that this time I'll do well. And the housing? God willing, everything will work out." The water was getting cold, but Barbara didn't seem to notice. She was having such a good time. But remembering why she was here, Debbie grudgingly finished her bath and put on her robe and left the bathroom. She stopped in the middle of the hall, not knowing where to go next. To her room. But Barbara would have to meet her ward. Yeah, but she needs to change. There's nothing to change into. The dress she was wearing was dirty and frankly smelled of sweat. As she stood there helplessly, wondering where to go, Oliver's footsteps sounded on the stairs. "Have a nice day," he said with a smile. "Thank you," Debbie replied. "Now we'll eat and get to know the ward," Oliver said cheerfully and explained. "We'll eat in her room. Let's go." Oliver's mother was a thin and probably once very attractive woman. She had a kind, warm, and sincere smile. Looking at the owner's mother, Barbara wanted to believe that she would not be deceived in this house. "What can you take from me, though?" Day grinned wryly to herself. "Well, welcome," the woman said, her voice soft and melodious, weakened by illness. "My name is Anna." "Debbie?" She smiled. Oliver's mother was somewhere just over 50. If it weren't for the fine lines around her eyes and the corners of her lips, she might have been 40, if not less. Her long golden blonde hair, touched with gray, was slicked back and piled high. But unlike many of Anna's peers, this hairstyle did not age her at all. "Tell you what, Barbara," the ward said quietly. "May I call you that?" Debbie nodded, and Anna said, "So, Barbara, you are a guest in this house." Yes. And don't look at me like that. Oliver told me you were in a difficult situation, and it would be sacrilege to invite you here as a servant." Barbara looked at Oliver confusedly, and he nodded. Yes, that's right. You'll be more of a companion to your mother than a nurse. Debbie, what about your sense of humor? Sense of humor. I don't know what to say, the young woman said thoughtfully. Just 4 years ago, I would have said I had a great sense of humor. I'm a psychologist by training. But now, you're a psychologist? Oliver was a little surprised. Yes, she sighed. Did you work in your specialty? I did, Barbara nodded. In another life. You're right. Oliver smiled, suddenly winking at her. It was indeed in another life. And do you know why? Because now you have a new life waiting for you, and it will be better than the one before. Do you believe me? And for some reason, Barbara believed him. Debbie, do you know what I thought of? Oliver asked at breakfast. Anna was still asleep, and they were having breakfast in the kitchen. Barbara raised her head and looked at him questioningly. You will be my mother's personal psychologist, Oliver declared. Does she need a psychologist? Debbie asked. We all need a psychologist from time to time, Oliver said thoughtfully, clearly thinking about something else. Oliver was going to deliver the next batch of advertising papers and was dressed very casually in a t-shirt and tracksuit. Barbara remembered Oliver talking about his business problems, but didn't dare ask what he was doing. Oliver had been forced to sell his car because of debts, and now he walked to the office, thinking that a car would be very useful in his work as a courier. Besides, the bicycle provided by the advertising agency wasn't bad either, and good for your health, Oliver thought cheerfully. He always knew how to find the good in everything. Hello, Julia, Oliver greeted the ad agency employee. You're as charming as ever. Thank you, Oliver, she smiled. It's nice to hear a compliment early in the morning, and from such an interesting man. It wasn't a compliment, but the truth, Oliver smiled. Julia was indeed a lovely, petite brunette of about 23, with sly brown eyes and long eyelashes. It's still a pleasure. The employee replied, not without coquetry, and began to get down to business. Here are your newspapers. Have a good working day. Thank you. Oliver put a pile of advertising newspapers on the trunk and drove off in the direction of the work front entrusted to him. On the way to the site, the former businessman thought about the nurse he had brought into the house to care for his mother, more precisely, about his personal psychologist. And to be perfectly honest, Oliver didn't see Barbara as an employee. Debbie was undoubtedly very beautiful. Oliver had no way of knowing what the young woman had looked like before she'd been in a difficult life situation. But it seemed to have done Barbara some good. She had her passport with her, and Oliver knew that Barbara was 27, a year less than he was. No, Debbie didn't look older than her age, although in her position, that would make sense. It was just that those stunning green eyes seemed to belong to a woman in her 40s, if not older. The eyes of a wise and long-suffering woman, Oliver thought. Actually, the ex-owner of the real estate agency would have preferred a caregiver in her 40s and 50s. But in his situation, there was no choice. As long as she was clean and responsible, Oliver decided, and rushed to catch up with the girl. Barbara made quite a positive impression on Oliver. Well, her psychology degree was a plus. Suddenly, Oliver realized he wanted to do something nice for Debbie. But what was it? As he thought about it, he almost missed the right street and mentally chuckled. Aren't you in love, Oliver? And remembering that airplanes came first and girls later, Oliver began his courier duties. Anna, what do you want for breakfast? Barbara asked with a smile. Don't fuss, girl, said the ward affectionately, and then caught herself. Oh, is it okay that I'm on a first-name basis? It's all right. So what can I make? Coffee and a couple of cheese sandwiches would be quite enough. Anna replied with a slight wave of her hand. And come to my place, and we'll have a chat. All right, replied Barbara and went into the kitchen. Barbara, I hope we haven't done anything to offend you? The landlady asked with genuine concern. No, not at all, Debbie exclaimed. You've just saved me. You gave me a job, a roof over my head. Not a job, Anna objected. You're our guest. Why should I be? It's not like I'm related to you. No relation, The woman nodded. But sometimes relatives are worse than strangers. There was a story in our family that actually got Oliver into business trouble. Well, Oliver into business trouble. Well, Oliver will tell you about that if he wants to, of course. Well, Barbara, unfortunately, bloodlines don't matter. Let's not be sad. Barbara, yes? I know the robe suits you, but perhaps we could find you something from my closet. Oh, this is so uncomfortable. No way, Anna snorted. It's much more comfortable than walking around the house in a man's robe. And the woman laughed merrily. Barbara laughed too, and in a minute they were laughing until they cried. Okay, everyone, let's get started on the image. Anna winked, getting out of bed. Oh, I'm getting a little dizzy. So, maybe later, Barbara asked fearfully. No, it's all right, soothed her employer's mother. I'll just sit for a few minutes and everything will be fine. Debbie ended up with a pretty blue viscose polka dot dress, a light cotton blouse with a floral print in pastel colors, a pair of summer skirts, and a long robe of fine silk. Well, that's different, Anna said approvingly when the young woman put on the blouse and skirt. You're a fashionista, Barbara said with a smile. Of course I am. Oliver often spoiled me with beautiful clothes, she said in a satisfied voice and added with a sigh. When he had the chance. Well, God willing, things will work out for him. Anna, said the young woman, do not think. I can do a lot of things, and I am ready to do everything that needs to be cooked. The house cleaned, the windows washed. Barbara, Anna jokingly wagged her finger. I told you, first of all, you are our guest. When we're done distributing the advertisements, Oliver went to the office, and then it hit him. Why didn't I think of that before? He reminded himself as he pulled up in front of the clothing store. Barbara has absolutely nothing to wear. He remembered Barbara's dress, which had probably been given away at the social hotel, and sighed heavily. Oh, how he would have loved to get her into his Peugeot and take her to the boutique. But, alas, those blessed times when Oliver could afford it were behind him. But don't do that, he ordered himself sternly. What are your years? You're nothing yet. And you're in such a decadent mood. You'll have it all. Well, in the meantime, blue girls. How much does a dress like this cost? Oliver asked the two young saleswomen, taking off his sunglasses. No matter how much Oliver convinced himself that there was no such thing as a bad job, and the most important thing was that there was one, the former entrepreneur was desperately afraid that someone would recognize him. No, Oliver was not a snob. After all, he wasn't a wealthy heir himself. Still, his pride prevented him from showing himself to people he knew, especially those in the business community, in the role of courier and other downstairs characters. But this store was on the outskirts of town, and the risk of being recognized was minimal. Oliver was willing to bet it was zero. One of the girls mentioned the price of a pretty dress, and Oliver wondered if his present earnings would be enough for a couple of such dresses. And when he realized that it would be enough, and there would even be some left over, he said happily, Well, that's fine. Let's do it this way. I'll be there in half an hour and bring the money, and you pack this, well, and perhaps this. Are you sure you're coming? The second saleswoman asked. Sure, smiled Oliver. Nice guy, she said. Yeah, his girlfriend's a lucky guy, his partner said. He's not rich, but he's like a rock. You know, I think he's got all the riches ahead of him. Today, our store, and there, and then, look, to an expensive boutique is not far away. Oliver was pleasantly surprised to see his mother and Barbara talking and smiling at each other in the gazebo. Anna hadn't been outdoors for the last month, only looking out the window. Summer was just coming on, and it was still a little chilly in the morning, so her mother had thrown a poncho over her shoulders. Anna's cheeks were rosy, cheerful, and beautiful, and Oliver thought their meeting at the hospice was nothing short of a gift. I'm back, he announced cheerfully. Oliver's gaze fell on Barbara. She was wearing the skirt and blouse he'd bought her mother in Thailand. "She's much prettier than I thought," Oliver thought in amazement, and suddenly felt like a seventh grader giving a chocolate bar to a girl he liked for the first time. "How was your day?" he asked cheerfully. "It was great," Anna exclaimed. "And we got a little dressed up." "Well done," Oliver nodded with a smile. Barbara thought, looking at them, that such a mother-son relationship did not happen very often. She thought back to her first husband. Alex had undoubtedly loved his mother, but there was still no such reverent regard for her. The mother of her second spouse, Barbara, did not know. Michael, whoever he was, had said she was dead. But was that really the case? Barbara shook her head, pushing away the thought of who was responsible for all her troubles. "Is something wrong?" Oliver asked. No, nothing's wrong," the young woman assured him. "Barbara, I have a little present for you." Oliver smiled, pulling out a package. "You shouldn't have," Debbie said, embarrassed, realizing it was probably clothing. "You should have," he said firmly. "You have to wear something, don't you? But I'm here to take care of your mother. Why on earth should you give me presents?" "She doesn't trust men," Anna sadly realized, and decided to take matters into her own hands. "Barbara, I accept that you are uncomfortable accepting gifts from a man you don't know very well," she said. "But you can accept these things against a future paycheck." "Well, of course," Oliver exclaimed, looking gratefully at his mother. "Well, if that's the case," Debbie nodded. "That's settled," Anna summarized. "Now let's go to lunch. Oliver, Barbara, and I made these cutlets. They're delicious." "She's magic. I already want some," smiled the son. "So let's go. What's the point?" A week passed. The atmosphere in Oliver's house improved from day to day, and it could not but be happy. "This girl has become a ray of light for us," Oliver thought one day, and that word, more than any other, suited Barbara. Anna was revived and seemed to be on the mend. The house was always well fed and exemplarily clean. Sometimes it seemed to Oliver that Barbara was a member of their family. He thought about her a lot in general, until he finally realized he was in love. "Barbara, I think Oliver likes you," Anna said one day. "What makes you think that?" "Barbara, these things don't happen for some reason," said the ward, who had become a real friend to Barbara these days. "I'm Oliver's mother, and I can sense his moods. You can't fool a mother's heart. When you have children of your own, you'll realize that." Barbara sighed heavily at the mention of children. After all, that was essentially where it had all started. Or had it, after all? Alex had turned out to be a philanderer. So whether they had a child or not wouldn't make any difference. Sooner or later, his nature would come out. Anyway, it happened the way it happened. "Barbara?" "Oh." She woke up from her musings. "I probably shouldn't have mentioned it," Anna said thoughtfully. "It's all right." "Really?" the woman asked incredulously. Barbara nodded, smiled, and, squeezing Anna's hand, whispered, "Really? Girls!" Oliver's cheerful voice broke the lyric. "Why don't we have a picnic?" "The weather is marvelous. My soul is in need of a party. And there's an occasion." "What's the occasion?" Mother inquired. "I got a bonus today," he bragged. "So, it's a godsend." "Why?" "That's a good idea." Anna said it was a good idea. "Barbara, what do you think?" "I like it too." The young woman smiled. "Well, then I'll go to the store for wine and meat." "Barbara, how do you feel about wine?" They had already switched to you, and each was pleased to note that it was more comfortable that way. "Wine? I don't know. Honestly, I'm not a wine drinker, but I wouldn't say no to a nice glass of wine." "No one's offering anything bad," Oliver laughed. Oliver returned half an hour later with 2 rather heavy bags of food. In addition to 2 bottles of red wine and an already populated pork kebab, he bought huge pink tomatoes, cucumbers, greens, cherries, and a bunch of bananas. "Wow!" Anna exclaimed. You, Oliver, have decided to make a feast for the whole world. Well, the whole world can wait. But for two lovely ladies, I'd love to... While Oliver was grilling the kebab, Anna was cutting vegetables, and Barbara was setting the table in the gazebo. The young woman suddenly had a strange feeling that they were a family, which made her very embarrassed. It even seemed to Barbara that Oliver and his mother might be eavesdropping on her thoughts. What a thing to say, she said to herself. What am I to them? A servant, that's all. They're just good people. The kebab was ready, Oliver reported ceremoniously, and the women sat down at the table. They ate the tender kebab, the spicy aroma of which spread throughout the neighborhood, washed it down with wine and chatted about all sorts of things, and really looked like a cheerful, friendly family. After the third glass, Anna said, I think I'll go and lie down. I'll see you out, Barbara said, and taking the woman under her arm, led her into the house. Anna, why don't I stay with you? Debbie suggested it. No, Barbara. It's just that I'm getting used to sitting around. I just need a nap and I'll be as good as new. You go sit with him, have a chat. All right, well, a young woman, but if you need anything, just call me. Promise? I give my word of honor, smiled weakly Anna. Go on, girl. You could use at least a little fun. Oliver, too. Barbara left the room and Anna looked after her and suddenly smiled at her thoughts. Is everything all right? Oliver asked when Barbara returned to the gazebo. Your mother assured him that she was just a little tired, she replied. Oliver nodded and said, pouring wine for himself and Debbie, Hey, Mom, how much she's been stretching herself for me. For as long as I can remember, all she did was fight to make sure I had everything I needed for a normal childhood. Can you imagine my mom worked 2 jobs and never took a vacation, took a paycheck, and ended up compromising her health? I'm glad I had the opportunity to pamper my mom. When she turned 45, I took my mom to a restaurant. You should have seen her eyes. Mom looked at me as if I had given her the whole world and it was worth it. Barbara listened without interrupting and thought what wonderful people they were. One another's backs. And how lucky I am to have met them. She thought for the umpteenth time. Great, she said aloud, smiling with one eye. I wish I'd had that opportunity. My parents left so early. And while they were alive, I had problems. I'm sorry, Oliver replied with genuine regret, and suddenly covered Barbara's hand in the table with his own. But you know what? I think your parents are looking down from heaven right now and are happy that your life is getting better. I'm sure you're going to be fine. Let's drink to that. They drank, clinking their big, tall, puffed glasses. You know I was set up by my own cousin, Oliver said sadly. Is there such a thing? It happens, Barbara. It doesn't, he sighed. In fact, it's what got me into business trouble in the first place, and some serious ones at that. Well, come on, as they say, we'll live or die, and the world is full of opportunities. We'll fight for our place in the sun. Barbara, why don't we take a little walk? A little walk around the village. It's very beautiful here now. I don't know if that's convenient, the young woman hesitated. What if Anna needs something? What's the phone for? We won't go far. We'll walk around the neighborhood and back. All right, Barbara gave up. She suddenly felt like going for a walk herself. I'll just check on Anna. Good, Oliver replied with a smile, touched by her mother's concern for him. It was getting dusk outside, and Barbara felt a little awkward walking along with a handsome young man. It was like a couple in love. They reached 2 huge oak trees. Grass and bells were sprouting next to the trees. Debbie suddenly thought they were tinkling. When my mother and I first moved to the village, I used to love to come here and listen to the sound of those oaks, Oliver said. It's really beautiful here, Barbara nodded with a smile. But your eyes are much more beautiful, he said softly. And wrapping his arms around Barbara's waist, he kissed her shyly and gently at first, then more insistently. Debbie, he whispered. Barbara. The young woman stiffened at first, then resolutely wrapped her arms around Oliver's neck, It wasn't even a kiss, but a protest of two people who had suffered so much against this cruel and merciless world. They snuggled against each other, but both of them felt like no, not close enough. "I'm not letting you go anywhere," Oliver whispered fervently. "I need you so much." Now Oliver understood. This was the woman he'd been waiting for. And if Barbara suddenly wanted to leave, he would hold her by force. Oliver knew for sure that they had to be together. "Oliver, don't," Debbie said quietly but firmly. "This isn't right." "But why?" "I think we need to. Well, get to know each other better. And I think we already know each other enough," Oliver whispered, taking her hand. "There haven't been many women in my life, and you know why. Because I've never been the type of man to go through the ranks looking for the one. I only look out for the ones I see as my woman. And now I know I've found her." Barbara caught every word Oliver said, and she wanted so badly to believe that everything he said was true. 2 experiences of failed relationships hadn't gone unrewarded, but it's better to do and regret it than not to do it and regret it all your life. Debbie remembered the famous saying and snuggled into Oliver's arms, feeling like a kitten who had found a master after a long wander. The next day was a day off, so Oliver didn't have to go anywhere. At breakfast, Anna glanced furtively at her son, and when she saw the happy faces on both of them, she thought, "Lord, make these two be together." "Mom, I need to tell you something," Oliver smiled. Barbara rounded her eyes, and Anna mentally thanked the Almighty. It looked like what she'd been dreaming of was becoming a reality. "Anyway, Barbara and I love each other," Oliver said. "Is that true?" Anna exclaimed. "Oh my God, Oliver, that's the most wonderful news I've heard in the last year. Oh, my children, I'm so happy for you. Barbara, what about you?" I... The young woman could not utter a word with excitement. "Anna, it's true," Barbara replied with an embarrassed smile. "I love Oliver." "Well, that's wonderful. I think this matter should be celebrated. Oliver, Barbara, why don't we make a celebratory dinner?" "Why?" smiled the son. "We could. Barbara, what do you think?" "Why not?" "Well, that's great," summed up the happy mother. The dinner was lively. Oliver joked a lot, laughed and gallantly courted his girls, as he called his mother and his favorite woman. Anna couldn't remember the last time she had seen her son so happy. "I wish they were doing well," the woman thought. "After all, they both deserve it." 3 months passed. September was cold, but Oliver and Debbie were warmed by their love and anticipation of happiness. It couldn't be otherwise. 2 weeks ago, Oliver brought a valuable parcel to the office of a young company, and the man sitting in the chair exclaimed in amazement, "Are you Oliver Oliver?" Oliver was confused. He had already forgotten about his, albeit former, belonging to the business community. He was terribly embarrassed to appear before a businessman in such a disadvantageous position. But it had already happened. "Yes, it's me," he admitted. "You have no idea how long I've been looking for you," he said, and stood up sharply from his desk and shook his hand. The young man was hardly more than 25 years old, and to Oliver's amazement, he looked at the courier as if he were a celestial. "In short, I need someone like you," the man said more slowly and seriously. "I'm Ilan. I'm the head of this company. We are engaged in the production of doors and windows. Interested?" He's still asking, thought Oliver, who no longer hoped to catch on to any possibility. "Well, yes," Oliver replied discreetly. "But it doesn't bother you that for the last year no company has wanted anything to do with me?" "Oh, come on," said Elon cheerfully. "Everyone who is aware of the situation knows where the legs are coming from. Besides, you know, in business as in war, if it's not you, it's you. And if someone falls into a puddle and can't get up, only 1 out of 10 will lend a helping hand." Out of 10, Oliver thought with a sad chuckle. The count was in the tens. On the whole, though, he liked Elon. He reminded Oliver of himself at the beginning of his career. Oliver suddenly remembered Elon, whom he respected as a man and as a professional. So this kid is his son. Well, a worthy successor. Elon offered Oliver a cold juice, after which the men discussed the details of their cooperation without delay. It had proved fruitful, thanks in large part to Oliver. "I'm proud of you," Barbara said, when she heard that her lover was back in the game. "I always knew you would do well," Anna exclaimed, hugging her son. The lovers sat in the restaurant waiting for their order. Oliver never tired of admiring Barbara. Over the past 3 months, she had become more beautiful. Barbara had a striking appearance, so she hardly used any makeup. A little mascara, a little eyeliner, and a peach-colored gloss lipstick. Her luxurious brown hair Debbie tucked into a high hairstyle and decorated with studs with rhinestones. A diamond like that needs a gorgeous setting, Oliver thought, looking at her with loving eyes. A nurse. Isn't he an idiot? Although I must admit she did her duties as a nurse with an A+. True enough. True enough. Anna was on the mend, and there was no hint of ill health. Well, and the offer of cooperation Oliver regarded as the final chord in the series of troubles. But that wasn't all. Barbara had a job too. She was now an office manager, almost a specialty. After all, dealing with people requires a knowledge of psychology. The waiter brought some cold dessert with an intricate composition of strawberries and mint leaves on top. "Try it," Oliver smiled. "I'm not much of a dessert person, as you know, but you have a sweet tooth." "It's delicious," Barbara approved, and she used her dessert spoon to scoop out a bite of something that looked like mousse or ice cream. "And beautiful. It's a shame to eat it." "You should eat it." The young woman poked a berry on her dessert fork and gasped. Under one of the juicy berries lay a wedding ring. "What do you say?" Barbara nodded, and the young woman's eyes sparkled. "You haven't forgotten anything?" Oliver asked. "No, I haven't," Debbie laughed. "Oliver, for God's sake, that's the 10th time you've asked me that. It's just that I'm a very much in love young man." He raised a finger up and, grabbing his new bride in an armful, began to kiss her. "Don't mess up my hair," Barbara jokingly begged him. During their playful fuss, Oliver's purse and all its contents fell at their feet. "Tay-tay," said Debbie with a laugh. "And someone's going to ask me for my passport. Where's yours?" "My bad," said the happy groom-to-be. "Now I will correct this oversight." Oliver's cell phone rang, and he answered it and whispered to Barbara, "Not as a favor, but as a friend. Please come up to my office. My passport is in the top drawer." Barbara ran up the stairs with a smile, thinking that Oliver looked like a businessman. "He is awesome," she thought lovingly. Barbara opened the top drawer of Oliver's desk, and suddenly her eyes fell on a document lying on the desk. Actually, not even a document, but a stamp with a picture of an apartment and the inscription, Romcar Real Estate Agency. It seemed to the young woman that she had definitely seen this seal, and the name of the company was painfully familiar to her. And no wonder. It was thanks to Romcar that Barbara had become homeless. "Oh, God," she whispered, covering her mouth with her hand. "This, then, is what comes out." Barbara was afraid to think any further. The truth was obvious. What to think now? She thought feverishly. I won't be able to look him in the eye. Though who should be ashamed of him or me? When Debbie came downstairs, Oliver was still on the phone. He smiled at the sight of Barbara, but when she threw his passport and the document she'd found on the table in his face, he rounded his eyes fearfully. "Sorry, I'll call you back in a couple minutes," he told the caller and rushed off after Barbara. Too late. When Oliver ran outside, his favorite woman was already getting into a cab. At that moment, Oliver was berating himself for buying a house next to a parking lot. What was the use? He was more interested in another question. What was the fly that had bitten Barbara? Apparently, it was the title deed to the apartment of one of the firm's longtime clients. She needed a certificate, and the woman's representative had contacted Oliver, and Oliver slumped helplessly on the couch. He seemed to realize what this was all about. After all, Barbara had said that her parents' housing had been found to be in dispute. She probably thought the name of my agency sounded familiar. Did Archie have something to do with this? Elon, I have a favor to ask of you, he said as he stepped into Elon's office. 2 weeks ago, Elon had asked Oliver to be his partner. And best of all, they'd become friends. What's the matter? Elon asked. Oliver, what's wrong? Elon, Oliver said, trying to sound calm. Could you run me through a deal I made a long time ago? Details later. Strange, Oliver said thoughtfully, looking at the report Elon had given him. Romkar had nothing to do with it. Then what's the matter? Anna asked her son, who had returned from work and, noticing the absence of her future daughter-in-law, asked, Where is Barbara? Barbara? The son asked her, wanting to pass the time. And, Oliver, are you all right? Anna asked warily. Should anything be abnormal? Oliver smiled wryly. Oliver, I've known you for over a quarter of a century, said the wise and perceptive woman. And I know your every mood, so you don't have to tell me. Mom, she's gone, Oliver said quietly. Oh my gosh, my mother shook her hands. What happened? I wish I knew, he exclaimed in despair, feeling humiliated and ashamed. Maybe you offended her in some way? You see, son, sometimes we women are offended, and you men don't understand what... Mom? What are you talking about? Oliver shook his head. You saw me dusting Barbara off. I had one idea, but it turned out to be a mistake. What thought? I told you, I didn't think so. Did you? Meanwhile, Barbara was sitting on a bench in the Walk of Fame, thinking, Now I won't believe any man. They're all the same. Barbara? She heard a sympathetic female voice. Debbie slowly looked up and saw a pretty young, expensively dressed woman in whom she didn't immediately recognize Kathy. Next to her former classmate stood an Erica with a baby sleeping in it. Kathy, Barbara exclaimed in surprise. I see you have a baby? Married? Kathy lowered her head. No, that didn't work out. Remember Liam, the guy I dated when... Katie didn't finish, but Barbara understood perfectly. Yeah, she nodded. I remember. So, sighed the classmate. When he found out I was pregnant, he backed out. Silly. Really stupid, Katie agreed. He didn't even realize what he was giving up. My Dashulia is so cute. Well, that's his problem. How are you? You look great, by the way. Me? Barbara asked me with a sigh. And me, Kathy, I'm back on the street. I've got a good job, but no roof over my head. That's the way it is. You're as lucky as a drowning man. You know what? Let's go back to my place. No fools this time. We'll grieve over our failed womanhood together. Sounds pessimistic, but there's no choice, Debbie said sadly. Barbara, I'm so embarrassed. I asked you to leave the apartment, said the classmate guiltily. Don't, Kathy, she shook her head. After all, it's your apartment and your personal life. You fought for your happiness as best you could. And then there's the matter of whoever remembers the old days. You're a saint, Katie said thoughtfully. Not at all, Barbara said. It's just that more often than not, problems make us look at things from a different angle. But something's not right, Barbara, Kathy said thoughtfully as she listened to her classmate's story. Is he really such an idiot to put a document on the table and then ask you to bring him a passport? It doesn't make sense. I don't know, Debbie shrugged. Maybe he forgot it was on the table. Maybe he did, Kathy nodded. What's the name of the realtor's office? Romkar, Barbara said with a wince. I'll never forget it. Oh, really? No, it can't be. Ramkar, Oliver, that's the one. Barbara, either you got it wrong or it's not that simple. Yes, Oliver was one of the most honest businessmen in the world. Liam knew him well. No kidding. It's a messy situation, and rumor has it his cousin set him up. Oliver's innocence was proven, but the real culprit was never found. Well, I mean, he is known, but no one to this day knows where he is. Barbara froze. She suddenly remembered how Oliver had once said that his cousin had set him up. Of course he had. It had been that memorable night when he and Oliver had first kissed. So, it really wasn't Oliver's fault, thought Debbie. Barbara, I think you two should talk, Kathy insisted. Well, good for you too, running off without explaining yourself. Well, what was I supposed to do? Was I supposed to nail him to the wall? You could have done that. At least I'd know the truth. Oh, right, too. I don't know what to think or believe, Barbara sighed. I'd like to believe it, but it's too simple. And to be wrong twice in the choice of a man is also, you know. In the next room, the baby cried, and Kathy went to her daughter. So, Debbie, said the classmate about 20 minutes later, like I said, you can stay with me. There's plenty of room for everyone, and besides, it's more fun with just the two of you. But personally, I think you should explain yourselves. Well, I can't advise you on that. As you can see, you're a wounded bird yourself. That's not true, Barbara thought. You have someone to live for. It was a month after Barbara had moved in with Kathy. A classmate was working remotely. Debbie, having quit her job at Mr. Elon's firm, was taking care of the baby. Two of the classmates supported each other as best they could and took turns with the baby. How lucky Kathy is after all, she thought, stroking her rosy velvet cheeks with the pads of her fingers. She has a child, and I'm not lucky. Kathy offered to be Amanda's godmother to a classmate, and Barbara was honored. I feel dizzy, she said as she left the church, and nauseous. Maybe it's the smell of incense, suggested the new mother-in-law. I get that sometimes, too. And, glancing at Barbara, Kathy remarked, You look a little pale. Are you sick? You know, Kathy, I haven't been feeling well since this morning, the young woman remembered. Well, there was no sadness. Barbara, well, what else? When was the last time you had? These things... Girls, can't we get in the car? Ginny, Kathy's mother pleaded. I'm tired, and Amanda's being a pain in the ass. Mom, wait, Katie said. What's up? What are you talking about? Barbara didn't understand. What do you mean? What business? Her friend stared. Our women's stuff. The once-a-month ones. Wait, you mean? That's exactly what I'm saying. Katie nodded triumphantly. No, Barbara thought for a moment. Of course, I would like it very much, but alas, I've been trying for a long time. But to no avail, and the doctors didn't give any favorable prognosis. Well, my dear, I can name more than one couple who, already desperate to conceive a baby, eventually became parents. What's the point of guessing? Go to the women's clinic tomorrow. Come on, let's get in the car before my mom eats us for dinner. Congratulations, Mommy, you are 7 weeks pregnant, smiled a pretty red-haired woman about 35 years old. Are you sure? Barbara asked, confused. It's just that I haven't been able to get pregnant for several years, and now... Well, my dear, I've been working for years, and I can recognize pregnancy on the count of one, laughed the gynecologist. So run, prepare a festive dinner for your husband, and make him happy with the news. Yes, I will. Thank you. That's a good one, Debbie thought. I've been in a marriage that didn't work out, and now I'm in a relationship. I don't know what kind of relationship. And here we are. Barbara, do you realize you have to explain yourself now? Exclaimed Kathy. Oh, I don't know about that. Debbie realized she'd been foolish. But it was too embarrassing to go to Oliver with her tail between her legs and say, Oh God, that too. He'll think I'm trying to tie him down with a baby. Barbara thought with horror. Barbara, you've got it all written all over your face. Kathy laughed. I bet you're thinking right now that it's wrong for a decent woman to tie a man down with a baby. Debbie just grinned. She had a very perceptive friend. Barbara, answer me one yes or no question. Do you want to be with Oliver? It's not well, it's yes or no, Kathy reminded her. Yes, Barbara replied and lowered her eyes. That's what you should dance from. And how do you dance? I mean, what to do? The answer was obvious. Come and confess to Oliver. Or rather, find out what's what. Well, what if he is guilty? The fact that they let him go doesn't mean anything. Oliver had money, connections. Katie, honestly, I want to believe Oliver's innocent. But I'm afraid I'll be fooled again. I don't understand your position. For the life of me. Katie shook her hands. Even if you suspected him, you could have told him openly. Wouldn't you? Why are you leaving in English? I don't understand it anymore, Barbara said repentantly. And, Kathy, there's something else. Something else. You're a real piece of work, aren't you? So what's going on? No crime, I hope. No. She shook her head. Not on my part, anyway. Anyway, I kept it from Oliver that I'd been victimized by a con man. After Alex, I remarried, and hubby screwed me out of my apartment. He turned out to be a marriage and apartment scammer. Well, this is interesting. Something tells me. Well, it should be checked out. I have a thought. What is it? Daddy's interested. Barbara, later. Kathy wasn't exactly a lucky woman in her personal life, although that was one way of looking at it. She was bright, showy, and had a lot of Olivers to her credit, including some rather enviable suitors. But she hadn't had much luck with serious relationships. But here is what cannot be taken away, so it is a crowd of admirers. So why not take advantage of the connections? Where are you going? So beautiful. If it's no secret, Barbara asked as Kathy, dressed in an exquisite cherry-colored outfit with an asymmetrical hem and one sleeve, concentrated on her makeup. A secret, sang Katie, and grabbed a clutch embroidered with glass beads and hurried to the exit where a cab awaited her. My favorite smiled seductively at her beau, who worked in the Ministry of Internal Affairs. I would like to bring up a not-so-old story. Remember the scandal with the real estate agency Ramkar? Eric and Kathy were sitting in a small but incredibly cozy restaurant styled like a hunting lodge. For Eric, it was a date he'd spent a third of his paycheck on, and for Katie, it was a business meeting. Although, that depends. Well, or else, hummed Eric, who had been long ago and hopelessly in love with Kathy. It was a very ambiguous case. And the culprit turned out to be many-faced. This is it, she thought excitedly. I think I'm on the right track. What do you mean? Katie asked in an innocent voice. That's what I mean, smirked the admirer, looking at her with loving eyes. Oliver was set up by one Archie, his cousin. But that's not even the point. This very one is known under several first and last names. Dingo. Eric, I adore you, purred Katie, and sitting up to her admirer, kissed him on the cheek. Eric blossomed. The next day, Barbara sat in the restaurant waiting for her friend. Kathy was indecently late, and she had already pulled out her cell phone to call her friend. Hello. She heard a familiar baritone and hiccuped in surprise. Hi, Barbara squeaked pitifully, and, unable to think of anything better to say, added, I was expecting Kathy. You'll get Katie, Oliver nodded. In the meantime, Oliver took out his smartphone and entered the gallery. Barbara, do you know this man? He asked, opening the rephotographed picture. I do, Debbie said, stunned. That's Cody, my second husband. I'm sorry I didn't tell you that. Anyway, he's the reason I ended up on the street. Well, why didn't you tell me about him? I was ashamed, she admitted. Shamed, Oliver repeated. Meanwhile, if you had told me about it right away, and ideally the name of my firm, there would not have been the misunderstanding that happened between us. Oh well, whatever. It's just, honey, This Cody guy's real name is Archie Pluzhnikov, and he's my cousin, or was. I have no idea what's wrong with him now, or if he's even alive. I wouldn't be surprised if he isn't, with his penchant for adventure and card games. When I reported him to the police, they instantly said he was also known as Mike. Barbara whispered. Maybe. Barbara's cell phone chimed, notifying the owner of a messenger message. The young woman smiled. It was a message from Kathy. Don't forget to tell him the important thing, a friend wrote. Easy for me to say, thought Debbie. However, she had to do it anyway. Oliver? Yes, my love. Oliver smiled charmingly, taking Barbara's hand reassuringly. There's something I need to tell you. I'm listening to you carefully. Oh God, I've been looking forward to this, and now here we are. What's the matter? Oliver laughed. It's like you're hiding some terrible secret from me. In a way I am, Debbie nodded. And then she said, I'm pregnant. Barbara, is it true? Oliver exclaimed happily. No, I was just kidding. The young woman frowned. Ask me if I'm sure it's your baby. No, Oliver laughed. I'm certainly not going to ask that. I'm as sure of you as I am of myself. Eric and Katie came up to them. They're in cahoots, Barbara gasped. Exactly. The trio laughed back. Barbara, don't forget. I have to catch the bouquet, Kathy reminded them, for the 10th time. If it hadn't been for me, this wedding wouldn't have happened. You're my Cupid, Barbara smiled, hugging her friend. I remember everything. But to tell you the truth, I don't see the point of it. Eric is going to propose to you any day now or tomorrow. I know, smiled her friend and part witness, but I want everything to be according to tradition. Barbara, I love you. They heard Oliver's voice and looked out the window. Barbara sent a kiss to her husband, and Oliver waved. You know, Kathy, the happy bride said seriously. Oliver once told me that from now on a new, happy life awaits me. And he's right, Katie continued cheerfully and winked. So let's get on with our new life, shall we? Yes, Barbara replied with a smile. At that moment, the young woman was more sure than ever that all the hard trials were behind her, and her life was finally on the bright side. This time, she had the most wonderful man in the world by her side.